All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the League Express podcast. My name's Jake Kearnan, and joining me as always is the editor of League Express, Martyn Sadler. How are you going, Martyn?
Great, Jake. I'm absolutely great. It's been a lively week in rugby league, at least on this side of the world, and I'm sure the same's true in Australia. So we've got a lot to talk about. Obviously, one of the main things today is going to be the squad named by Shaun Wane. That is a preliminary squad. Obviously, it's not the final squad that'll play against the Aussies in the Ashes, but I'll be heading over to a hotel near Manchester tonight to meet most of the guys who've been selected. So, and to meet Shaun Wane, and no doubt he's going to explain the rationale behind his selections. But they're fascinating to see, and we'll no doubt want to talk about them and the England prospects more generally.
Yeah, for sure, mate. There's a lot of names that have made it, which is great to see, but there's a few that have missed out as well, so we'll touch on that a little bit later.
Absolutely.
But yeah, mate, big week over this side of the world as well. We've got Origin coming up. Origin squad's announced, so a bit of news around that we might touch on a bit later as well. But how about we get into the weekend's matchups? Starting on Friday night, we had a pretty high-scoring game between Leeds and Lee. Leeds winning that one 48 points to 30.
Yeah, it was just the sort of game that would appeal to people coming to watch the game for the first time. My colleague at League Express, Steve Nibbertson, was saying that he had a friend who went to that game to watch his very first ever game of live rugby league and really enjoyed it. Because obviously to see lots of tries zipping in from here, there and everywhere is quite incredible. The best one was probably the one scored by Lucky Miller, who showed incredible support, running from about 40 metres behind Harry Newman to just pick up an offload that Newman gave on the spot and dash about 60 yards to score was really a treat to see. And I thought it was going to be our try of the week until Warrington's game on Saturday. So great stuff by Leeds, back to form. Lee didn't play badly but couldn't quite live with Leeds on Friday night, and Leeds have moved up into third place in the table as a result of that win. Did you see the highlights, Jake?
Yeah, I did, mate. I couldn't believe it. I sort of started feeling a little bit sorry for whoever was doing that match report, mate. They would have constantly been looking up to see who scored and what minute it was and how it was scored. So they're probably running out of words to explain all of those tries, mate. But yeah, great to see. And looks like Jake Connor had a really good match as well. A few try assists there as well.
Yes, played well, and but not well enough to. Not well enough to pique the interest of Shaun Wane, unfortunately for him. But you never know. Yeah. Later in the year, the current squad isn't set in gold, so there's always a chance for somebody else to force their way in. Mm-hmm. But yes, Connor played well, but then so did most of the Leeds players. Yeah. Although I think also there was somebody said that I've not checked whether this is true, Jake, but somebody said Lee's 30 points was the largest score by a losing side for quite a long time in Super League. So, and I'm sure it probably was. Yeah. So they can feel a bit disappointed, I think.
Yeah, no, I'm not surprised. Because at points when I was watching the highlights back, at points it looked like Leeds were starting to run away with it, but then Lee would hit back, and then Leeds would run away a little bit more, and then Lee would hit back. So it looked like a real back and forth game, and yeah, it's one of those ones where you look at and you think, should the coaches be concerned about some of the defensive lapses, or was it just one of those high-octane games where...
Well, there will be. But it was played in warm weather. You know, it really was played in warm weather. So I think you've got to excuse the players to some degree for one or two defensive lapses that perhaps wouldn't have made in cooler conditions. So, but let's not complain about a game that was great to see, great to watch, and which was exciting throughout, I thought. And good luck to Leeds, and who are still agonising over whether Brad Arthur's going to stay with them next year or not. Who knows what's going to happen there. But the other thing that was notable about the game, Jake, was Callum Watkins had an absolute blinder for Leeds, and we made him our player of the week because he just was in great form, both attack and defence, and showed he's still got an awful lot to offer. And he's recently, as we've pointed out a week or two ago, signed a new contract at Headingley for another year, and you can see why they wanted to keep him.
No, definitely, mate. He's fitting in really well there since he made the move back.
Absolutely.
Move into the other matchup, mate. We had Hull KR defeating Wakefield, 34 points to 10. It looked like Wakefield had a good start to this match.
12-10 at half time,
yeah, just too strong.
Yeah, they, I think the Hull KR fans were a bit worried for part of that. Certainly, at least for part of the first half, Wakefield were very, very competitive, but fell away in the second half, as many teams do at Hull KR, and Hull KR edged to a very convincing victory ultimately, which leaves them 4 points clear at the top of the table, and we made them our team of the week because they've now established that it's been their best ever start to a league season. 15 wins out of 16 games. The only loss was to Wigan. They're 4 points ahead of Wigan and heading towards the League Leaders' Shield by the look of it. So, although they play Wigan again in August at Wigan, so that's going to be a real game to relish, isn't it? And but their great form carries on, Jake, and who's going to stop them? I don't think anybody can be confident of beating Hull KR at the moment, even Wigan. But we'll have to see. I think this week, this coming Sunday, is going to be a big test for them because they play Leeds at home, and Leeds are in great form. So that's another game to really relish.
Yeah, definitely, mate. And it'd be interesting to see them against a full-strength Wigan. I think they're a much better team than when they obviously lost to Wigan. So, I'm going to pencil that one in my calendar and make sure I'm up for that.
Absolutely, yes.
That'll be a hell of a game. Moving into Saturday's matchups, mate, we had Catalans defeating the Huddersfield Giants 32 points to 0. Big scoreline.
Catalans coming back to form, but the temperature was about 38 degrees in Perpignan, and the game kept being stopped for water breaks. It's probably, I wouldn't like to be definitive about this, but it's perhaps the hottest ever conditions in which a Super League game has been played. So I didn't envy either team, but Huddersfield clearly couldn't handle the conditions. The Catalans clearly could, and if ever a team needed a win, it was the Catalans. And, it must have been a great relief for them and their supporters and their owner, Bernard Gouache, apart from anybody else, that they were able to impose themselves in that way. And it was great to see a young French player playing so well. Leo Darella Tour, I think, is the way that we pronounce his name. He scored their first try, and they also had Guillermo Aspiro-Bicho playing as another young French prospect. And it's always great to see young French kids coming through the ranks at the Catalans. I wish there were more of them, but it's great to see them when they do arise.
Yeah, for sure. I'm sure maybe the heat's having something to do with Luke Keary's recent form. Maybe he's feeling right at home in those hot conditions.
Well, yeah, probably, yeah. But he certainly played better than he has done probably in any other game this year, and it's great to see that, isn't it?
Moving to the other matchup, mate, we had Warrington defeating Hull FC 24 points to 10, and was a much needed win for Warrington.
Yeah, only 12-10 at half time. They set off like a house on fire. They scored a couple of tries through. Well, their opening try, we did make the try of the week. That was Josh Thewlis, who picked up the ball from dummy half just less than 10 metres from his own line and ran through the whole defence. And that was just the start that Warrington needed after a couple of weeks of really shaky performances. And they shot out to a 12-0 lead. The other Thewlis, Jake Thewlis, scored the second try for Warrington, and it looked as though they might really put all to the sword. But Hull fought back through Matty Barron and Aidan Caesar. It was only 12-10 at half-time. But then the Wolves scored 2 tries in the first 10 minutes of the second half, and that was it for the scoring. But they weren't altogether convincing, I didn't think. But Sam Burgess was happy to get the win. He was pretty happy with the performance generally, I think. And it puts them now just 3 points outside the top 6. Hull is 6th with 17 and Warrington are 8th with 14. And it makes the top 6 an attainable target once again. If they'd lost that game, Jake, they would have been 7 points behind Hull, and that would have been getting into territory that would be too hard to achieve. So great for Warrington. They're still in the running, and let's hope we see some more good performances by them, because they're too good not to be a contender at the very least.
Yeah, I'm sure he's probably not worried about how he gets the wins, just as long as he gets them in the 2 points to keep him in the fight.
I'm sure that's the priority at the moment. Yeah.
The other matchup we had Wigan defeating Cass 26 points to 20, and which was a very tight affair.
Marred by controversy, as they might say. Yeah, and Danny McGuire was absolutely livid after the game, not surprisingly, because there was a terrible video referee error that I'm afraid it was Aaron Moore who made the mistake, which the RFL has since apologised for. Basically, it was a loose ball, and it was a captain's challenge actually, but there was a loose ball, and the young Castleford winger Josh Sim was trying to get at it, but he was clearly held back by Wigan halfback Harry Smith. But for some reason, the video referee didn't seem to spot that, although everybody in the crowd at Castleford did do. And Wigan won the captain's challenge quite undeservedly. And from that, they actually went downfield to score a try through, who the heck was it? It was, Zach Eckersley. That was on 69 minutes. That put them back in the game. And they then scored the final try to win the game by Liam Farrell on 78 minutes. And you could see that coming. Once that mistake was made and Eckersley scored his try, you could just see a Wigan win coming in the final few minutes, which Wigan are so good at. I mean, you've got to give Wigan credit. They do play for the 80 minutes, and they did do on this occasion, and it was Liam Farrell who scored the winning try. The Castleford fans were absolutely cheesed off, to say the least. The Wigan fans were ecstatic. But Danny McGuire really let rip in the interviews, both in the press conference and on Sky TV afterwards. And we actually made him the quote of the week, more or less, saying what the bloody hell's going on. He couldn't believe it. Apparently he's now being investigated for those comments by the RFL, but my goodness, if the RFL do or try to penalise Danny, then I think there'll be a march from Castleford on the RFL HQ. To be honest, I don't think it would be wise for them to try and fine him for those comments that were made in absolute, despair, I suppose you might say. And I thought Danny did pretty well to control himself as far as he did, to be honest. So let's not make something bigger of it than we ought to.
No, that's right. And I think when they've come out and admitted fault, it sort of justifies the comments he made. And I like the one particularly where he said, something along the lines of, he didn't care if he gets fined for those comments, he'll pay it back a penny or a pound a day.
Yes.
So I like seeing when a coach gets fired up and defends their squad.
Well, Danny's very. I mean, Danny wears his heart on his sleeve, doesn't he? He is very emotional. There's no. I mean, coaching is an emotional occupation. To be honest, I don't know how they do it. Some of them, to be fair, and I thought what he said was totally justified. So if Danny is fined, I think the Cass fans would certainly club together to pay it for him, and I think a few other people would contribute as well.
Yeah, maybe a GoFundMe might get started for him, perhaps.
Yeah.
And then moving into the final matchup of the round, mate, we had St Helens defeating Salford 58 points to 0. again, probably no real surprises here.
Yes, a hat-trick from Kyle Felt, who's back in action after quite a lengthy period. I mean, I think he came back the previous week, but good performance by him. And in the opening game of the season, well, this was replicating the opening game, and in that game, Saints scored 82 points. So this time it was only 58. And Salford actually had a stronger side out than they've had for quite a long time. And of course, they were celebrating the fact that they didn't go under last week at the High Court because the case brought by HMRC for unpaid taxes was adjourned, with with Salford rather claiming that they will get a bridging loan soon that will enable them to pay off those delayed taxes. I hope they can. I hope they do, and I hope things can look up for them from now on. But certainly it was another very one-sided game. But I don't think that will upset Paul Wellens. Paul Wellens, as you know, was under a lot of pressure, but Saints are now motoring again. They beat Leeds the previous week with a very convincing performance. They've now they're still in 5th place, just 1 point behind Lee, but they're certainly looking safe in the top 6. They're 3 points ahead of Hull, who are in 6th place. And and there's an interesting game this weekend because Hull hosts St Helens. We'll talk about that in a few moments, no doubt. But it's going to be, I think St Helens are a much better team than some of their fans have given them credit for in recent weeks. And we'll see whether I'm right or whether I'm wrong. But I'm actually a great fan of St Helens, and I don't think it would be wise to write them off this season. Not in the slightest.
It seems like from all of Paul Wellens' comments, it looks like he's confident they're over that hump and are starting to really build some momentum. So, fingers crossed this is just a sign of things to come for the Saints, and we can see them playing some footy at the back end of the year.
Absolutely.
Be all right, mate. Just 2 other things I wanted to touch on, mate. Looks like Martyn, he could be facing a bit of time on the sidelines for it seemed like an innocuous high contact tackle on Max Jowett, I believe. He was sort of falling and made contact with his head. Now, I don't know if there's been any developments in this, but I think I saw somewhere online that that could be a grade E charge, and he could be looking at a lengthy stint on the sidelines.
Which would be unfortunate for him because he's only just come back from a long injury layoff. So let's hope. I've not seen the match review panel decisions this week yet, Jake. So I'm not quite sure whether they've made a decision on that one or not. But I think, as you say, it will go to the. It looks as though it's going to go to the tribunal direct, which does imply a grade E charge and quite a potentially lengthy suspension. Whether it was that bad or not, I must admit I've not studied it very carefully, but we'll see. I mean, certainly Martyn isn't the sort of player who would do anything maliciously. If I suspect, if anything, it was careless rather than anything else. So I'd be very surprised if he did face a lengthy ban, but who knows? It's not always predictable these days what the tribunal is going to come up with, is it?
Oh, that's right. There's I think Liam Horn could also be in a bit of trouble as well for one of those lifting a player while they're injured. Potential charges. I saw a replay of that, and it very much the same. Just sort of tugged on the jersey a little bit. So I'm hoping.
Yes, but you've got to be very careful, and I think they tend to come down on that sort of thing very strongly. And you can understand it in a way because if a player's injured. Nobody can be sure until the player shows signs of recovery what the injury is. So if you actually try and lift a player, then you do run the risk of exacerbating the injury, don't you? And that's obviously undesirable from everybody's point of view. So Liam Horn may find himself paying the price for that one. And again, we'll see what the decision is.
I must say though, for players, it must get bloody frustrating when they see a player potentially playing for a penalty by slowly getting to their feet and then...
There's no doubt, but you've got to exert self-control, haven't you? You've got to exert self-control, and that's the thing. And Liam Horn may well have to learn the hard way. That you've got to do that, and as you say, you've got to sympathise with him a little if he thinks that a player is taking advantage, but you've got to let the referee take charge and not take charge yourself.
Yep. All right, mate, let's talk about some of the things you touched on in your column. We'll start with the big one. With the preliminary squad being picked, Jake Connors missed out. There's a few other notable names who I think you were hoping might be included in the squad. Who do you think was unlucky to miss out on that preliminary squad?
Well, I think Dean Hadley of Hull KR was unlucky to miss out. Let's just have a quick look at the numbers. 32 players, 7 from Wigan, not including Bevan French. We might want to talk about this, but I actually wrote a piece about the British Lions having 9 players who qualify on their current tour of Australia through either residence or ancestry. But there are no players like that in Shaun Wane's squad. I did wonder whether somebody might tap. But Bevan French has been here since 2019, playing for Wigan, so he would potentially qualify for England on residence grounds. But clearly, I assume he doesn't want to play for England, or hasn't been asked, presumably. But nonetheless, there are 7 Wigan players in the squad. There are 6 from St Helens, 5 from Warrington, so that's 18 players between those 3 clubs. There are also 5 from Leeds, and only 4 from Hull KR, who are running away at the top of the league. So Hull KR are the best team in the competition at the moment, but they only have 4 players who have been selected, which you might find a bit surprising. As I say, I thought Dean Hadley might be a contender. I think he's quite unlucky. I thought Jack Broadbent's been playing extremely well, either at full-back or at centre for Hull KR, and is a great utility player on that basis. And I thought that might get him into the into the squad. And I thought, the two Hull KR wingers, Tom Davis and Joe Burgess, have both been playing very well as well. But neither of those two have been picked either. So that's, it's a bit surprising for me. But Shaun Wane is the man who picks the squad, and he's decided to go with the 32 players that he's selected. Amazingly enough, there isn't a single player from Castleford. There isn't a single player from Catalans in the England squad. No Tommy Makinson, for example. There isn't a single player from Hull FC, which is quite interesting as well, I think. And there are just 2 from Lee and 2 from Wakefield. The 2 Wakefield ones are Tom Johnson and Mike McMeekin. The 2 Lee players are Owen Trout and Rob Mulhern. I'm quite surprised that Max Jowett of Wakefield didn't make the cut. I think he's been playing extremely well for Wakefield this season. And amazingly enough, there's only 1 full back in the squad, which is Jack Welsby. So that is quite surprising from my point of view. I would have thought that he'd need a backup full back, given that Jack, of course, is facing a long injury layoff at the moment. And that suggests to me that AJ Brimson, the Australian player from Gold Coast Titans, who is a full-back, is going to be in the squad when you add the players who currently play in the NRL. So it's quite interesting to actually... I always like to sort of look at a squad and then think of putting together a side from all the players who haven't been selected. I mean, he's not... the oldest player in the squad is actually... Darryl Clark of St Helens, who is 32 years old now. There's nobody older than Darryl, so all the older players who served Shaun very well in the past. I did speculate in the column on whether he might. I know Shaun loves Mickey McIlorum, the now Hull KR hooker. He's loved Mickey since his Wigan days, and I did wonder whether he might even pick him, but clearly not. Players, even players like we mentioned Callum Watkins earlier. Callum Watkins playing outstandingly well, but clearly not well enough to get into the squad. So he's gone for a youngish side with quite a lot of players in the squad. I think there are 12 players who were born in this century. The youngest is the St Helens player Harry Robertson, who's been outstanding recently. He's the only teenager in the squad at 19 years of age. So we'll see how that performs. What are your impressions, Jake, of the squad that he's picked?
Yeah, I like it, mate. I kind of like the move away from some of the senior players. I know in the past he's been criticised for picking players like Chris Hill, and I guess the risk you run with that though is, do you have enough veteran voices in the group? I'm intrigued to see what that squad looks like if he was to include some of the England talent playing in the NRL at the moment, and who in that squad might drop out. But yeah, I'm not sure, mate. Interesting, like you said, he's only picked one fullback. I guess, they do have players in there that could cover as well. Like I've mentioned in weeks before, Mikey Lewis would be able to cover that number 1 jersey if something were to happen to Wellesby if he wasn't able to get back and fit. But interesting that they've only picked 4 Hull KR players. I think in the past with Australia, often it used to be the case that whoever was in the grand final, they tended to have a big representation in our Australian team come the end of the year, and I'd say that will continue on this year as well. But you also want to be picking players in your team who will be playing in the grand final, because they're going to be the ones that are in condition.
Oh yes,
and they'll be most ready to play when Australia come over. So yeah, you run the risk if you're not picking teams players from those 2 top contending teams. You do run the risk of them being a little bit underdone as the series starts. But they're all professionals. I'm sure they'll keep their bodies in shape and ready. But
I mean, it is a forward-heavy squad as well. The vast majority of the majority of players are forwards rather than backs. Interestingly, if you look at the right wing spot, he's actually picked 4 wingers: Ash Handley of Leeds, Liam Marshall of Wigan, Tom Johnston of Wakefield, and Matty Ashton of Warrington. They are all actually left wingers. They all play on the left, and although Ash Handley's been playing at centre as well, he's actually has squad number 4 for Leeds this year. But he's not picked a single guy who normally plays on the right wing, which again suggests that Dominic Young needn't fear for his place when the final squad is announced later in the year, despite some people saying he's not been in the greatest form for the Roosters earlier this year, and of course now he's gone to Newcastle Knights. So interesting, isn't it, to just sort of speculate, to look at where the gaps are in the squad and think, how we might fill those gaps with players from the NRL.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that before. Do you think Dom Young on current form will get into this team? But
I think he will. Yes.
So the other question I had, Matty Ashton, what's his status? Is he going to be fit to play the Ashes at the end of the year?
It's very debatable. It's very debatable. He's got quite a long-term knee injury, and I'd be surprised if he were fit. But I mean, he's obviously a terrific player when he is fit. And when he is fit, there's no doubt he deserves his place in the squad. Whether he can recover in time for the Ashes series is a very difficult question to answer. So I don't know, but I suspect that he probably won't recover in time. But who knows? I mean, I hope he does, clearly, but hard to say at this moment, Jake.
If the other question I had, if Will Price was not injured at the moment, do you think he gets picked in this squad?
Well, as I say, he's not picked a full back other than Jack Wellesby, and Will Price was playing before he got injured, was playing very well at full back for Hull FC, and I think the slight downturn in Hull FC's form may well be a reflection of Will Price's absence. So I think Will Price is probably certainly worth considering for the England squad. Whether Shaun Wane shares that view or not, I'm not quite so sure. I may know a bit more later today when we've had a press conference with the England squad and Shaun has answered one or two points that no doubt people will raise with him.
Yeah, I think it's probably pretty safe to say that Herbie Farnworth will be the left centre, I believe Herbie plays, but who do you think will partner him on the right side?
I think that's the biggest certainty of all. Well, interestingly enough, the centre who I rate highest is Jake Wardle of Wigan, and he's actually a left centre too. But I think I wouldn't be surprised to see him playing at right centre for England. The other right centre who's been selected is Harry Newman of Leeds, who's a real fine player, but I wonder whether he's consistent. Shaun Wane does tend to like consistency in performance, and I wonder whether Harry Newman is consistent enough for him. Harry is one of those brilliant players who can occasionally make blunders, and while that might not matter so much if you're playing against Salford, it probably would matter an awful lot if you're playing against Australia. So I'm not absolutely convinced that Harry Newman will get into the final selection to partner Herbie Farnworth. But a centre partner of Farnworth and Jake Wardle, even though one of them would have to play on the right centre position, would look pretty formidable, I would say.
I think it's safe to say, like, there's so much potential strike in that back line. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how the Australia's edges, face off against England. I think, it's going to be. It'll probably come down to more who's better at defending, because we know there's a lot of spark, there's a lot of attack, but who can sort of, stop it will be the big question. I'd love to see. I wish Stephen Crichton would put his hand up and play for Australia, because.
I'm tempted to say I'm glad I hope he does that.
Oh mate, yeah. But I'm saying that what's he play? He's been playing right centre, I believe. So imagine the matchup between him and Herbie Farnworth.
It would be terrific. Yeah. If Stephen Crichton were to opt to play for Australia, I think he's such a great player that would certainly tip the scales in Australia's favour in the in the Ashes series. So yes, I think that would be crucial, and I don't know what his decision is going to be, but I suspect that he will stay with Samoa. But who knows? It's up for grabs, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure, mate. And maybe the incoming coach of Australia, whoever that might be able to.
Won't be Brad Fittler, will it? Now that it's been decided.
No, that's right. I was going to raise that with you. We might lead into that now, mate. But Brad Fittler's withdrawn from the race, from all reports. There's been a few names tossed up. Obviously, Kevin Walters was one. Cam Smith has been one that's showed a bit of interest. Do you think Cam Smith coaching Australia would be a good move, or do you think they should go with someone like Kevin Walters, who's done it at rep level before?
Well, Cam Smith, that would be his first coaching job, and it seems odd to make somebody's first coaching job to coach Australia. So I can't really see that happening. I would have thought Kevin Walters would be a much safer bet. Kevin is, obviously he didn't last the pace at Brisbane Broncos ultimately, did he? Although he did take them to a grand final. And they were very unlucky not to win that grand final. So Kevin Walters certainly has the coaching credentials, and I can't see a better coach on the horizon than him to coach Australia at the moment. And the thing about Kevin also is that he's actually pretty good speaking to the media. He's got lots of experience in the media, and I would hope that when Australia come here, they'll do a lot of media work, and Kevin would be really excellent at doing that. I know that's not probably the main thing that a coach is there for, but it's very important in my view. And I think the Australian team will be a great team no matter what, to be honest. And you've only got to look at, you've only got to look at the performances of the Origin teams this year to know that they're going to be formidable, whoever they are. So whoever the coach is, I don't think it's going to be the hardest job in the world, frankly. And I personally would like to see Kevin Walters doing the job.
Yeah, great. I agree, mate. I think Kev, he's such a passionate coach. You see that passion when he was coaching not only the Broncos but Queensland as well. And he's one of these coaches that when he is talking about what it means to pull on that jersey, you can see the tears welling up in his eyes. That's how much it means to him. But the other thing you spoke about, mate, in your column, we've gone on a few tangents here, and we touched on it a little bit earlier, but the announcers over in Western Australia for the British and Irish Lions match against the Western Force, he had a few cheeky digs at some of the England players, British players playing for the Lions. You said, if we touched on it, you wouldn't mind seeing if that rule might apply to someone like Bevan French, but I think you're also quite proud that in our history there hasn't been many players that have represented England that weren't actually born or played rugby league in England.
No, not really. The earliest example I gave was David Barnes, the black South African player who came from South Africa in the 1970s, came to Wakefield initially and then to Bradford, and was selected for the 1979 Great Britain tour of Australia. And that was fine for me because he'd been living here for many years by the time he was picked for Great Britain, and in those days he couldn't play for South Africa anyway because of course they had I don't think there was a rugby league team representing South Africa, and in any case he had left the apartheid regime in South Africa, so a black player couldn't have played for South Africa at representative rugby union in those days. So that was a great selection as far as I was concerned. Later on, we had Murray Fasavalu, the Samoan player who played against the Kiwis in 2007 and then in the 2008 World Cup with England. And then later on, we had Chris Hyington, who played for England or Great Britain because of the ancestry rule. Although he'd never played rugby league in England for a club side. So there have been few and far between those sort of players, and we might get, as we said earlier, AJ Brimson playing for the under the ancestry rule, and I think it's Max King, isn't it, who's also was actually born in England when his father played for Huddersfield. So. But he's of course played for for New South Wales in the Origin this year. But he'd obviously be a useful acquisition, and you could hardly deny somebody playing for England who was actually born in England. But whether he has expressed a strong interest in playing for England now that he's played in the Origin series, I'm not quite so sure, Jake. I don't know whether you've got any up-to-date information on this.
No, I don't know if much has been made since his Blues selection, but if I was down in Blues camp as a journalist, it's something I'd certainly ask him. But yeah, I think if an Australian jersey presented itself to him, I think he would stick with Australia. But who knows? I mean, like you said, he's born in England. Maybe that's where his allegiance lies. We'll have to wait and see.
Well, he was born in England to an Australian father who was actually just playing over here. So I'm not sure, whether his allegiance really does lie with England. I'm not absolutely sure, but he's certainly a very good player. Anyway, that's one thing for sure, and he would certainly strengthen the England squad. There's no question about that. So we'll see, but we don't look as though we're ever going to be in the same situation as the rugby union people, as I say, who have 9 players on their current tour of Australia who qualify either through residence or ancestry. And but rugby union seems to do that. But it's a bit like cricket. Cricket for years has selected players for England who weren't born in England, and nobody seems to bat an eyelid. And the rugby union is much the same. It's only in rugby league that people tend to say, well, we're not keen on seeing players who are not fully fledged Englishmen playing for England, in the sense that they were born here and live here and play here and so on. So we'll see. We'll see what happens, but we're certainly not going to have a lot of those players playing for us, are we?
Yeah, no, you're right, mate. And it's funny that the announcer was having that dig, because we can't really throw stones. We have players playing for our country that come from Pacific Islander heritage as well. So,
or even New Zealand. Kalyn Ponga, born in New Zealand, and may play for New Zealand again. There's talk that Kalyn Ponga may revert to New Zealand this year for the Pacific Cup, which would be interesting, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would be. It'd be essentially, forfeiting his right to play for Queensland, though, if he was to make that switch, I believe. So, just up to him, see what he wants to do.
Incidentally, talking about the Pacific Cup, we ran a little news story this week. The only English-based player to play for New Zealand in the Pacific Cup last year was Peter Hiku of Hull KR. And Peter Hiku is currently the only player in World Rugby League that I can see who could potentially win 4 trophies this year, because he's won the Challenge Cup with Hull KR. They're well on the way to winning the League Leaders' Shield. They could, of course, then go on to win the grand final at Old Trafford in October. And Peter Hiku, if he did get selected again for New Zealand, which certainly has to be a real possibility, he could go on to win the Pacific Cup with New Zealand. So what a great year it could be for him if it all works out. We asked him about that last week, and he was a bit... It wasn't, it wasn't looking much beyond this week's game against Leeds, really, or last week's game against Wakefield. But it would be a remarkable achievement, wouldn't it, for any player to be able to do something like that?
Oh, for sure, mate, yeah. And look, who knows, if the World Club Challenge goes ahead early next year, he might have 5 trophies in his cabinet from this year going into next. So
that would be amazing, wouldn't it?
He's playing good footy, so who knows? It's for every possibility. Moving on, mate, we touched on it last week before the news broke, but Nigel Wood, he's returned, he's not returned, but he's the new RL Commercial Chair. Has he said anything about what his plans are going forward, what he would like to see, what direction he wants to take RL Commercial and the game in?
Well, what I suspect is that I'd be very surprised if Nigel didn't merge RL Commercial back into the Rugby Football League, because RL Commercial was set up several years ago now to exploit Rugby League assets to generate more income for Rugby League, but it's not got a sparkling record in having done that, and yet it's actually cost quite a lot of money to operate. So Nigel, being the accountant that he is, will, I suspect, and I don't know this for sure, but I suspect that he would want to save money by merging RL Commercial back into the Rugby Football League. And but I think his main concern, he's heading this strategic review of Rugby League in this country, which probably now won't issue its final report until December. But I suspect that they are mainly concerned with trying to get Rugby League into a state where outside investment would be strongly attracted, because the game is facing a financial shortfall and it needs to plug that gap. It needs to generate some money. It needs to be able to invest some of that money into pathways and into expanding the competition and so on. And Nigel, I suspect that is probably his greatest priority, and that means creating the competition in a form that has the widest appeal, but it also probably means taking away some of the club's existing rights to put a blocker on some of the decisions that are made in the best interests of the competition as a whole. So it's quite a challenge for him, and I'm hoping that at some point in the near future, I suspect in a week's time they're going to have the Rugby League Council meeting, and I suspect that at that meeting he will be elected as the chair of the Rugby Football League. And I'm hoping that at some point after that he'll come onto this podcast and we'll be able to talk about what his plans are. And I hope he'll be, at that point start to be quite forthcoming, because I think he's been reluctant to talk much about his plans in any great detail before he actually becomes the chairman of the organisation and then has the status that would allow him to put his views forward with the authority that status gives him.
Yeah, no, it seems like he's keeping his cards very close to his chest at the moment. And only time will tell what changes he makes. But yes, we'll extend that invite for him to come and discuss all of those proposed changes on the podcast, perhaps.
I think he is quite keen to join us at some point in the not too distant future. So, we'll hopefully try and hold him to that.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. In other news, mate, it seems like George Williams has a itch that needs scratching. Was the headline I saw on League Express this week.
Yes, the Dolphins. It looks as though he's going to get a 2-year contract at the Dolphins, which is looking more and more certain. I wouldn't be desperately surprised if he's signed that contract already, to be honest, Jake. And it's interesting because, he has now turned 30, so if there is an itch that needs scratching, he's got to go sooner rather than later. And 2 years at the Dolphins. The Dolphins are really starting to play well, aren't they? They've had a poor start to the season. I think they had 4 straight defeats at the start of the season, but they've now got into the top 8. I think they're in 8th place, just behind the Panthers, and things are looking great for them. Christian Wolff is doing a great job at the Dolphins as the coach, as he did at St Helens. And obviously George Williams rates him very highly, and he rates George Williams very highly. I think George Williams has obviously taken note of Asaya Katoa, the brilliant young halfback who plays for the Dolphins and who he would partner if he went there. And I think that would be a very appealing partnership in George's eyes. You couldn't blame him for rubbing his hands with glee at the thought of that. The only thing you've got to wonder about is what would happen to Cody Nikorima, because he's currently the halfback partner at the Dolphins, and there was some talk about him leaving there and coming to Warrington to swap with George, but apparently the Dolphins have now denied that. But you never know what might happen, do you? There's all sorts of potential combinations that could occur. And we'll watch with enormous interest. And I'd love to see George playing for the Dolphins in the NRL again. It would be really fascinating to see. But I don't think the one would be quite as keen as I would be.
Yeah, no, I agree, mate. The one thing I thought, as an outsider, as a fan of the game, watching the Dolphins play, this move surprises me a little bit, because I look at the way Cody Nikorima's been playing, and he's been playing some really good footy this year, and especially alongside Catau. It made me wonder, did the Dolphins really need to go out and sign Williams? Because I'd imagine Nikorima's on a pretty salary cap friendly contract at the moment, and playing above his value. So I think the worst thing that could have happened for Nikorima was that injury he sustained over the weekend. I think he tore his hamstring, so he's going to be out for 4 to 6 weeks. But yeah, leading up to the weekend, he's been playing some of the best footy he's played in years, and it made me wonder, maybe the Dolphins, do they need to sign Williams? I mean, I'd love to see him back in the NRL, don't get me wrong, but maybe another club could use his services. But
well, I'll tell you what, after this podcast, let's hope that you get a phone call from Christian Wolff explaining to you why he thinks he does need to sign George Williams. It would be great, wouldn't it, if he would do that.
But he's what do you know, mate?
Yeah, well, he's the coach and you're not. So it's his opinion that counts, unfortunately, more than yours, Jake, in this particular instance. But and you can't argue with Christian Wolff's record of success, I don't think. So whatever decision he makes is likely to be a good one, I would have thought.
Yeah, no, I agree, mate. And just on another side note, how good is Isaiah Catau playing at the moment, mate? He's got so many highlights. Every time he touches the ball, something's happening, and it has players and greats of the game like Joey Johns and Cooper Cronk and Jonathan Thurston saying that he's doing things at the young age of, I think he's 21 or 22, that, you know, players don't pick up until their late 20s, early 30s. So what a prospect.
Well, he's played for Samoa, but will he play for Australia?
I think was it Samoa? No, I think he's played for Tonga.
Was it Tonga?
But
right,
yeah.
sorry. Yeah.
But, I mean, yeah, I guess I'm not sure, actually. I don't think he'd represent Australia. I think he'll represent the Blues, but I think he would just keep his allegiances with Tonga. But that's a scary prospect, the thought of him and Nathan Cleary perhaps in Blues jerseys, although I don't know how their two games would go together in the halves. Yeah. But yeah, something to keep an eye on, mate. We'll see what George Williams' movements are going forward over the coming months. The other news, mate, State of Origin squads have been announced for the Game 3 decider in Sydney. I think the Blues are going in with an unchanged lineup, but the Queensland Maroons have put the call out to Josh Papali'i to come out of representative retirement to pull on the Maroon jumper again, and they've also called in Gemet Shibasaki from the Broncos, which is a real fairy tale kind of story if you think about it. He's currently on a development deal with the Broncos. He was on a train and trial leading into pre-season, and I think those deals are only worth about 80,000 Australian dollars. So he's playing on about 40,000 pounds at the moment, and he's just been given the call up for Game 3 in Origin. So
well, great for him.
Yeah, I believe last year. Yeah, he has been. I think last year he spent most of the season playing up for the Townsville Blackhawks in the Queensland Cup competition, and then he got that lifeline opportunity with the Broncos, and he's made the most of it. So,
well, there's some real talent in the Queensland Cup, isn't there? We've seen it with Kaius Fatili in England playing for Wakefield. So there's if you search hard in the Queensland Cup, you can find some absolute gems, and obviously Brisbane did it with him. So great, it is a great story, as you say, and whether it'll be a great story that ends with a victory in the Origin series is yet to be seen. I'm not sure it will, but we'll be talking about that next week, of course, won't we?
Oh, mate, yeah. I've got fingers and toes crossed after the game too. That almost gave me a heart attack in the final seconds of that match. But yes, it'll be a tough one. It's never easy winning a game 3 in Sydney. But I'm hoping that the Queenslanders can do it. All right, mate. Well, before we look at this weekend's matchups, anything else you want to touch on? Anything we've missed news-wise?
No, I don't think so. I think we've covered quite a bit of ground there, mate, and great to see. One final point, though. John Keir back in charge of coaching at Batley Bulldogs. He's been on this podcast a few times in the past and been a great, fabulous guest. And I'd just like to wish John all the very best of luck in his new role with Batley. He's got quite a big job to do there because they are struggling a bit in the lower reaches of the championship. They're in potential relegation trouble at the moment, and but knowing John, he'll get them out of it. He always does. He's an incredible motivator, and I'm pretty sure that he'll work his magic again. So, but best of luck to him, and best of luck to Batley Bulldogs.
Yeah, definitely, mate. And it's been an honour for us to sort of get to know him through. It's not only doing the podcast, you've probably had a lot to do with him outside of that, but when you hear him talk on the podcast and how passionate he is and how direct and straightforward he is, they're the qualities you want to play for. He
loves rugby league and has had a fantastic career as a player and as a coach, and also as an administrator, actually, when he was at the RFL. So, and has got some really strong views on the game and is very happy to express them. So, yeah, great guy.
Yeah. All right, mate, well, let's get into the weekend's matchups quickly. On Thursday, we've got Castleford taking on Huddersfield.
Well, the club's in 10th and 11th place in the competition. Huddersfield was showing great signs of recovery before they went to the furnace of Perpignan. I think it'll be a lot cooler at Castleford on Thursday night, and I suspect that Huddersfield might be able to put one over their hosts. Castleford are a strange team. They play well one week and then badly the next week. They played very badly against Hull KR and lost 48-0. Then they played very well against Wigan and were the best team and should have beaten them, but were, in a sense, conned out of it, I suppose you could almost say, by the video referee. So on that basis, they're due to have another bad game if that pattern continues. So I think Huddersfield might just be able to sneak a win here, and if they do, it'll be their third win of the season. So after beating Hull and Warrington. So, but I think Huddersfield might just do it by about 6 points.
Yeah. Then we've got on Friday night, Lee taking on Wigan.
Well, Lee are now in fourth place. What a terrific prospect this game is, the Battle of the Borough, as they call it, when these two teams meet each other, both teams being in the Wigan Metropolitan Borough. Wigan will be desperate to win because they need to keep up with... They need to keep Hull KR within their sights at the top of the table. They're 4 points behind them, and if they go 6 behind, that might be too big a gap to catch up. So I think Wigan might just edge this game through sheer willpower and determination. And Lee are a terrific side as well. It should be a marvellous game, but I just think Wigan might just have a bit too much for them at the final hooter. Again, a win by 6 points for Wigan.
Yeah, and in the other matchup we have Salford taking on Warrington.
Well, Warrington hopefully have turned the corner now, and I think they will continue to do so at Salford on Friday night. I think they'll win by about 20 points, and they'll sustain their challenge to try and get, into the top 6, and hopefully they might close the gap again.
Moving on to Saturday's matchups, we have Hull FC taking on St Helens.
Well, that's a hell of a game because Hull are just in 6th place at the moment. St Helens are in 5th and 3 points ahead of Hull. Hull have got a very poor home record. Hull seem to be able to win away, but not to win at home. And I regret to say that this trait might continue this weekend, and I suspect that Saints will win by 10 points. I think Saints have turned a corner, and I think they will continue to do so, and they will... they could even, if Lee can't beat Wigan, then Saints could move up into 4th place if they can win at Hull. And I think they'll win by about 8 points.
Yeah. And then we have Wakefield taking on Catalans.
Well, Wakefield are just outside the top 6 and they need to keep winning to get into it. And I think they will beat the Catalans. I think they'll beat them reasonably comfortably by about 12 points. And the Catalans, though, came to life against Huddersfield, didn't they, last weekend? Nobody thought they'd win by 28 points to 0. But I still can't quite see them winning at Wakefield, especially when Wakefield are so keen to win to get into the top 6. If Hull don't beat Saints and Wakefield beat Catalans, they will be in the top 6. And I think that will be an incredible high motivation for them. And by the time they kick off, by the way, at 5:30 on Saturday, they will know the result of that Hull v St Helens game. So I think if Hull have lost and Wakefield can get into the top 6 by beating Catalans, I think the motivation will only increase, and I think they will do it.
Yep. The final matchup of the round, mate, a really good one. Hull KR taking on Leeds.
What a great game in prospect, yes. And, gosh, I think this could be really close. But, again, we've said before this season, haven't we? You can't really look beyond Hull KR. So I think Leeds will give them a great game. I think they'll defend really strongly. But at the end of the day, I think Hull KR may just have a bit too much for them. And I also think Shaun Wane might have done them a bit of a motivational favour, because some of those players who I mentioned earlier, the wingers, Tom Davis, Joe Burgess, Jack Broadbent in the centre, and Dean Hadley in the back row, I think those players might be a bit motivated to demonstrate to Shaun that they perhaps should have been in his 32-player England squad. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if one or more of those players didn't have blinders and really showed us what they're made of. And I hope they do, if I'm really honest about it. So I'm picking Holkea to win, but not by more than 4 points.
Yeah, no, I agree, mate. I think there's going to be a lot of motivation for those Hull KR players, and I think he's probably lit a fire under them. So we'll wait and see. But it's going to be a weekend full of some pretty tightly contested matches by the looks.
Absolutely. But by the way, Jake, I'd just like to point out that last week I predicted all 6 winners correctly. And it did me an awful lot of good in the media tipping competition that's run throughout the season. I normally don't do very well in it, to be honest, but it's pushed me up the league standings a little bit, I'm glad to say. So with a bit of luck, I can keep up that record and pick another 6 winners this weekend, and I'll be very optimistic about doing so.
Oh, for sure, mate. Who knows where you'll be after a few perfect rounds, so keep that up. Who knows?
Yeah.
All right, mate. Well, I'm happy to wrap it up here if you are.
Just one final point to make. It's the NRLW starting this weekend with 12 teams, 6 matches. Oddly enough, all of the 6 games are all shown live on Sky Sports in England. So we only get 3 NRL games a weekend, but it seems like we get all the NRLW games, which is great. And it's I think hugely, the NRLW is hugely entertaining. It's really great to watch, and the 12 teams are very evenly matched, which is quite different to what we see in the English Women's Super League, where the teams are not all evenly matched, unfortunately. There are 2 new teams in it this year, Canterbury and New Zealand Warriors, and both of those teams are very optimistic about their prospects. So I think it's going to be really worth seeing. So keep your TV switched on, and I think the first game is being shown on Thursday morning our time. Cronulla are playing at home against, I think it's Brisbane, is it? I'm not quite so sure. Let me just check on that. No, Cronulla playing Parramatta, and it's being shown at 10:45 a.m. on Sky Sports. So watch out for that one, mate, and we'll see how the women's competition goes this year.
Oh yeah, mate, I can't wait. I've not only to watch, I guess, the action, but to see if this staged process that they're doing of bringing in a couple of teams every year or so, to see if that level of competition will still be as strong as it was last year. I've got no doubts it will be, but yeah, I'm really excited for it.
Oh yeah, well, the New Zealand Warriors, of course, it's great to see them coming in, because they, have a real pool of talent of New Zealand female players, and I think they're drawing a few players across from the New Zealand rugby union 7s and 15-a-side teams as well. So they will be very competitive, I'm sure, and I think the same is true of Canterbury. I was reading an interview with their captain, who's very confident that they're going to be in with a shout of winning the competition in their first season. So great for them, and I hope it all goes well. We'll look forward. No doubt we might give a bit of a look back at the opening weekend when we talk again next week.
Yeah, sounds good, mate. All right, Martyn, well, we might wrap it up here, mate, and do it again next week, eh?
Absolutely. Great to speak to you again, Jake, and thanks a lot, and enjoy the weekend.